My name is Rick Bernhardt. I'm the director of the planning department and been asked by the mayor to coordinate the NashvilleNext process. Over the last 2 years, we have had the opportunity to engage 15,000 of our residents in terms of looking at issues, what the future is, what you want, and so we're kind of moving into the last stretch, which is how do we translate that? How do we translate what we have heard? And we're going to kind of go through that tonight. There are really two parts of this. There's going to be a discussion that we're going to have of talking about the preferred future, which is looking at the countywide stuff, and Greg Claxton is going to kind of go through and bring you up to speed as to how we got here, what the findings of these first phases were. Jennifer Carlett's going to lead you through what we kind of refer to as a speed dating exercise, which is opportunity to understand the big issues and then quickly get some feedback from you working at the table. This doesn't require a table consensus, but it allows each individual to give us input there. And then the second part of our exercise will actually be looking at some of the changes in your community through the community plan process. And so that's why you're kind of sitting at different tables where you are, because we're going to do that. And we'll also give you an opportunity, if you are interested in more than one community, to do that. The process itself, while we're going to be talking a lot about land use and transportation, it involves a whole series of things from arts and culture, economic development, education and youth, a whole series of things that are going to be part of the plan with hopefully a plan issuance of the draft plan in February, and we'll kind of go through that. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Greg Claxton. I just want y'all to be kind to Greg. He has sacrificed the fact that this is his birthday. You can wish him happy birthday to be with you and to be with all of us here. So it's Greg. Here you are.
Happy birthday to you. All right. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate that. All right, so I'm going to catch you up on what we've been up to with NashvilleNext over the past 2 years. We've been doing this for almost 2 years now, as well as in particular what we've heard this summer. How many people have participated in some NashvilleNext event before or taken one of our surveys or what have you? Great, I see a lot of hands in the air. These sheets will look familiar. Please keep filling these out while I'm catching everybody else up on what we've been up to. Take the time and fill it out, because this is how we know who we reach, who we hear from, and where we need to put extra effort into outreach to make sure that we're hearing from everybody. All right. I'm going to go ahead and give away kind of the key points that I'm going to hit kind of along the way. These are our big 6 takeaways throughout the last 2 years as we've been putting together this map, this preferred future. One is we want to protect sensitive environmental features. We want to build out a complete transit network. We want to maintain and improve household affordability across all incomes throughout the county. We want activity centers throughout the county, strategic residential infill that supports along major corridors and activity centers, and we want to protect and enhance the character of different parts of the county. We'll come back to these towards the end. So just a quick update on what we've been up to over the last couple of years. We've attended a tremendous number of community meetings. These are not our own meetings. These 125, these are meetings at neighborhood associations, civic groups, business groups, all kinds of groups throughout the county. We go out, we talk to them, we take some input so that we can reach people effectively. We also know that not everybody attends planning meetings, community meetings, so we've gone out to different kinds of events and festivals to try to kind of draw people in as they're passing by. We've done the same thing with street teams, where we go to a Kroger or a Dollar General and try to kind of engage people as they're walking in. In our first 5 or 6 months of the planning process, we asked 3 basic questions. What do you love about Nashville? What needs to be improved? And just what do you want for the future? And out of that, we got a tremendous response. We got more than 8,000 ideas. We took those ideas, put them into about 180 categories, different things that we heard, then winnowed those down to 34 big vision ideas that we heard over and over and over again. And then we went back to the public and said, well, this is what we heard. What are your priorities out of all of these things? These 5 should look fairly familiar from that list I gave at the start. Affordability, transit, economy, walkability, and strong neighborhoods. based on all the ideas that we heard, we put together a set of what we call guiding principles, ideas that are going to shepherd the plan through to sort of stand in for the community's vision of what it is that we're trying to achieve. Be Nashville, foster strong neighborhoods, expand accessibility, create economic prosperity, advance education, champion the environment, and ensure equity. And then we went back again and we said, here's what we heard, did we get it right? And on a scale of 0 to 5, where 0 is I don't want this future and 5 is I do want this future, people said, this is what we're looking for. Around the same time, this is about a year ago now, we invited people into 3 or 4 meetings to gather around big maps of the county, 8-foot by 8-foot maps, and help us lay out, where do people think future growth ought to go? New homes, new people, new jobs. We had more than 300 people create 43 maps. We went through and digitized every sticker that somebody put on a map. We put into our geographic information system so we could see kind of stacked up where did people put most growth. Generally, people were looking to redevelop existing places, grow near downtown. People avoided undeveloped areas, sensitive environmental features, rural areas. And so that brings us to this summer. This summer was probably our biggest push for public engagement. We called it Pick Your Nashville. You may remember these kids. We had 3 basic ways we thought we could grow. One was business as usual. The other 2 were alternatives to business as usual. We call centers with adjacent infill and downtown and pikes. Things that 2 ways that we wanted to try to improve upon our current trend based on what we heard from the public in the first year. We went out, we had 25 lounges throughout the county where people could drop in, look at the futures, take our surveys, talk to us. We also had 4 community conversations on particular topics to delve into those a little bit more deeply. We had an online survey and a cell phone survey in English and Spanish. And then throughout the process, we've made a focus on trying to get to hard to reach groups. We knew that some were going to be very hard to reach in this round. So we had 7 focus groups to have in-depth qualitative discussions with those folks and bring them into the process. All told this summer, we had more than 4,700 people participate, which we were very, very excited by, both the scale of this participation in this round and because it brings us up to more than 15,000 throughout the process. What that means is we managed to engage a lot of people and maintain that engagement throughout about a year and a half of planning so far. So what did people tell us this summer? The first thing we started with was 12 outcomes, different values that we thought would vary based on which of our 3 futures we pursued. We asked people to pick their top 5. These were the top 5 results. Again, these should look very familiar. Public input throughout this 1.5, 2 years of Nashville Next has been very consistent on these points. We then said, okay, based on the 5 values that you picked, based on how well each future does, tell us what you think of these 3. So remember, business as usual, a fair amount of redevelopment near downtown, a lot of development to the southeast, but also a lot of continued spreading out throughout the county. Centers with adjacent infill in downtown and Pikes, we were both trying to focus more on redeveloping existing places, growing into undeveloped areas less. Centers, we tried to focus in particular centers throughout the county, fill in close to them. Downtown and Pikes, we tried to focus on downtown and then growing out the Pikes leading into downtown. We asked everyone who took our survey to rate each one of these on a scale of 1 to 5. 1 is poor, 5 is excellent. Business as usual didn't rate very well, under about 2. Centers with adjacent infill, most people rated that a 5. Average was just under 4. And then downtown and Pikes was basically the same as centers with infill. We heard, here and there, some people concerned that they couldn't tell C and D apart very well. They were very nuanced, kind of the differences between them. And we knew that going into it. So we were a little concerned that they were so close, and they've been consistently this close since we started looking at the data. We were a little concerned that everyone was rating them exactly the same. That's not the case. More than 80% of people rated these 2 differently. And yet they come out this even solidly throughout the entire summer. All right. That's what happened when we asked people to rate all 3 of them. That's how it broke down. If you took the paper survey, we also asked, all right, if you had to pick one, what would your preference be? Senators with Info was the runaway favorite here. And this is, as far as we can tell, entirely due to the transit system. You'll recall Downtown with Pikes had a hub and spoke system where all of the transit lines fed into downtown. Centers with adjacent infill added a lot of crosstown connectors to that. So that's very much something people were responding to. As we started putting together the preferred future, the maps that you have on the table in front of you, we came back to, what were the differences between C and D? What are the things that people were responding to them? What were their strengths? C, because of it, that expanded transit network, it did better at that, access to jobs and services and economic development. The Downtown and Pikes one did better for housing affordability because it opened more land along the Pikes up for housing development, and then also better at preservation of residential character. And so really a lot of what we've been trying to do is fit those two together. I want to make a couple points about affordability and transit before introducing the preferred future. First, at our housing and gentrification community conversation, we had just an absolute blowout crowd. I mean, it was by far the most attended event that we've had other than our kickoff. More than 300 people came out. And it was an incredible array from people of different backgrounds and from different parts of the county. That's reinforced by the fact that when we looked at who was it saying that housing affordability is an issue, it's more than half of everyone that we heard from in every part of the county. So this is an extremely broad issue. It's not primarily a low-income thing. It's something we're hearing up and down, inside and outside of the urban core. On the transit side, we worked with MTA to include a few questions in our survey that come at the transit system from a different perspective, from looking at, if I've got a fixed budget for transit, what are some of the trade-offs that I have to make between further stops and faster routes or closer stops to where I live that kind of slows the route down because it's got to be very circuitous. Generally what we heard, asking a question in a different way, was continued support for the transit systems we were exploring in the three futures, which is more frequent, more direct, even if that means longer walks and service in fewer parts of the county. Now, one thing I want to make clear is that this, by and large, we're probably hitting aspirational transit users with this question. When MTA asks this of their current riders, they will probably get a different set of responses. But that's part of the difference between kind of a short-term plan for operations over the next 5 years and the long-term vision that we're trying to set forth working with them. All right, so the preferred future, just a reminder, the key things that we're trying to achieve through this map: sensitive environmental feature protecting, a complete transit network, household affordability, activity centers throughout the county, strategic infill used carefully and sensitively, and then protecting and enhancing the character of different parts of the county. So what this map is, what the preferred future is, it's our way of sort of pausing after we collected all of this information this summer, putting our thoughts together and saying, did we get it right? This is our proposal for what's going to go in the plan. It's not done yet, it's not adopted, it's our proposal, it's us thinking out loud with y'all. What we propose to do with this is to align spending, regulations, and metro programs to improve quality of life for people in Nashville, so that new development and redevelopment, when it happens, is in line with our community's values. The way that we've put it together, it's a series of layers, and I'm going to walk through each one of those. And then when Jennifer comes up to walk you through the exercise, we're going to walk back through them again so we can kind of step through and understand what you think about each one of these. But I'm going to do the overview right now. First, our green network. These are our natural landscapes, natural areas. These are our rural landscapes, farming areas, streams, floodplains, steep slopes. Also our park network, our greenway system. Looking at kind of how this ties together the natural functioning of Davidson County and works for people for recreation, for cleaning our air and water, that kind of thing. We worked with looked at the current open space master plan, brought in a concept that they had called open space anchors. These are kind of our big premier parks in different parts of the county. And we've identified those in the darker green on the map. We've also identified, based on that plan, an area in the southeast that's lacking an anchor. So we want to kind of use this both to recognize what's there and where we need to continue working to fill in. The green network, generally, our focus is preserving and expanding and restoring this. For neighborhoods, very pale yellow on your maps, these are areas that generally currently exist that currently provide a mix of housing types across the county, a mix of character areas, rural, some suburban, some urban, with smaller pockets of retail, of office, of employment, civic uses like churches and schools. Generally, we want to sustain the character, maintain the character, and enhance kind of the way that these are supporting our residents. The next thing that I want to highlight is a faint brown buffer along our major roads and around each center. These are our transitional and infill areas where we want to have primarily higher density housing that helps to provide kind of a harmonious transition from large centers to kind of the interior of neighborhoods. So we don't want to have a situation where we have a 5-story building next to a 1-story house. We kind of want to make that smooth, partly because that's a better urban form, but also because that gives us a thing that we call missing middle housing. These are a range of housing types between mid-rise and taller buildings on one end, single family on the other, things like triplexes and fourplexes, bungalow courts, townhouses, courtyard apartments. These are things that introduce more of a variety of housing types at a different range of costs than a lot of what we're building right now. We think if we use this strategically to make transitional areas, this can be a win both for maintaining character and improving affordability. Next, we've got a series of centers throughout the county. These are pedestrian-friendly areas that support high-capacity, frequent transit use. They contain a mix of homes, jobs, shops, parks, school services, cultural amenities. They're kind of a rich and vibrant places. And we see these as functioning as part of their surrounding areas. So it's not like you have a center that's kind of closed off from the surrounding neighborhoods. These ought to be places where everyone, kind of in that area can come in, do their shopping, go to the library, run into their neighbors, and build community through that way. All right. This is the longer one to explain because I want to walk through a little bit of history here. The blue lines on your map are our high-capacity transit corridors, and I want to walk through kind of our thinking and how we've built on what's been done so far. So here on this map, not on the screen, not on the page in front of you, is our current local bus system. The darker lines run every 30 minutes or more often. The lighter lines run less frequently than that or during only certain parts of the day. Several years ago, we started looking to expand this transit network, get into more different kinds of modes, get into higher capacity modes. And so we added the Music City Star running out to Lebanon. We added the Gallatin BRT Light Line, a little bit more intense, more frequent, higher capacity. And then we followed that with Murfreesboro BRT Light last year. And then the recent plans have been to expand the BRT Light on Charlotte and Nolensville Pikes, and then adding full BRT on West End. And then, of course, all of this has happened in a regional context where we've been doing regional plans to connect from Davidson County out to the region, the thick dashed lines. So for us, this was kind of our starting point. We took this as a given. This was the result of a lot of years of planning and effort. And so what we're proposing to do is to, for our plans for the very long range, expand this network. And so that's the network that we're showing on this map is these core routes and cross-county connectors to really put together a complete transit system. We would look to make more of a focus on the thicker lines. These are areas where we think we can have a big impact, expanding service in the near term, maybe the next 10 years, whereas some of these are farther out. And the reason that they're farther out is because the transit system, the transit ridership, and the development pattern, the land uses, kind of have to evolve together. And so, one way to think about this is in areas of very low density, you can't really support local transit service. You're talking about a park and ride where unless you just happen to live next to it, you're really driving your car, parking, or getting dropped off to get to transit service. With a little bit more density, you can support some local service running on the hour, every half hour, maybe less frequently than that. And then with more density along your route, you can support frequent transit service, maybe every 20 minutes. Now, up to this point, you're running bus lines primarily is what we're talking about. The infrastructure for that is pretty minimal. It's a bench or a stick on the ground with a sign, but you don't have a lot of lock-in to one route. The transit system is able to adjust pretty easily to follow where the people are. As we start looking at more high-capacity transit options, such as our BRT Light routes, you start having to make more investments in the particular route. So you start making covered shelters, you start investing in signal prioritization where the bus can hold the light if it's about to turn yellow. That means investing not just in the bus that can do that, but in every light along your route. And at that point, you're saying, we really need to stick to this route. This is an important route. We're making investments in it. We need to kind of identify the routes that are going to support that level of transit service. That's even more the case when we start dedicating right-of-way, space in the road, space along the road to transit. You kind of want to align those with your most intense corridors. It's tough to just sort of put that out in a greenfield area and hope that the development happens around it. You kind of, you phase it in. All of this takes time to build up. In some places we have the density to support more frequent service now. In some cases we don't have it yet. So as you look at this transit network, be aware, most of NashvilleNext, we're looking at kind of a 25-year time horizon. This transit system is probably more like a 50 or 75-year system. It's a very ambitious system that we're going to need to grow into over time. But we think the way to grow into it is to start planning for it now. All right, the last feature on your map is what we call special impact areas. These are areas that are already in use in this way: airports, prisons, landfills, things that we generally don't want to put homes next to. So we kind of want to call them out differently. And in the plan, we have policies and goals to recommend not placing these in an inequitable way, not concentrating them in one part of the county. We'd like your feedback on that as well. Couple last points. These aren't quite things that are really map features, but I want to highlight them. One is regionalism. We've got the regional connections on our transit routes. That's one important thing. But also there's a lot of environmental features, such as our rivers and creeks and streams that are also regional in nature. These don't just flow into and cycle within Davidson County. So we're very aware of the regional nature of all of the work that we do. The second is affordability. This is something that it's hard to say, this one feature is where we get affordability. It comes from a range of things. First is, looking at our neighborhoods, our transitional areas along our major corridors, and then our centers. We want to have abundant housing that supports transit and provides people with housing choices. We want to incorporate that sensitively into neighborhoods. Where we have existing affordable housing, we want to try to preserve that, and where we need new, we want to create new affordable housing for lower income households. And then part of it is we want to manage demand for very hot neighborhoods right now, walkable neighborhoods, by creating more of them. Right now we see home values going up astronomically in our few walkable neighborhoods. As we build more, that should help to manage that demand. Generally, kind of from our perspective, the conversation that we've been having with the community for the past 15 or 20 years through our community plans, this preferred future is not proposing a great deal of change from a land use policy perspective, that what's in those community plans. This is actually pretty conservative. You'll hear more about that in the second part. The biggest thing that we've heard, our biggest takeaway, what we think the biggest value that NashvilleNext is bringing is the need to identify and then identifying better tools for achieving some of these things, for maintaining affordability, spurring demand throughout the county, building the transit vision, and growing greener. So that's what we hope to do as we roll out the draft plan in a few months. The last thing I want to end with, I skipped over the different kinds of centers that we have. We've identified several tiers. And what we want to use these tiers to, what we want to use the centers to do, is really to coordinate investments. Beyond any particular tool, any zoning change, any particular investment, we think coordinating all of the things that Metro does with the things that nonprofits do and the private sector is the best way that we have for achieving the vision people have been asking us for. So in our Tier 1 centers, the darkest ones, these are where we think we can have the greatest impact to shape demand to improve quality of life over the next 10 years. Tier 2 are areas where, there will continue to be investments, throughout the county, but these might be, have their most coordinated investments beyond 10 years. And then Tier 3 are areas that probably aren't going to get a focus right now, but if the private sector brings along an opportunity that fulfills the vision of Nashville Next, that could be, that's something we'll want to work with. So what does coordinated investment mean? These icons are from all of the different plan elements. Rick mentioned arts and culture, housing, economic development, education and youth. We're kind of taking a very broad view here. But some of the things that we're talking about could include sidewalks, public facilities, parks, our urban forest and greenways, transit, bikeways, and infrastructure. So if there's a part of town that has older infrastructure, that going ahead and upgrading it would kind of help open it up to new development, that could be a tool. Community schools, youth programs, economic and workforce development, creating and preserving affordable housing, and then placemaking and access to cultural amenities, kind of the things that make neighborhoods lively and feel kind of lived in and give a sense of ownership. Ultimately in the plan, we won't call it the preferred future, we'll call it maybe the growth and preservation concept map, maybe something else that's less wonky. But we'll also have a series of other maps that provide a little bit more detail. So here, the green network is basically 2 colors. We'll have kind of an open space network that delves in more detail and says, what's the floodplain, what's the steep slopes, what are the other things that we want to preserve, those kind of things.